Well, good evening, listeners. You're listening to Lament of Hope podcast, and I'm your host, Danielle Richardson. And I am really excited, and I was just, I've been excited since being able to set this up, but I am speaking with Rose Reid, who is a film actress. I actually was introduced to her work for one of her earlier films, Finding You, which came out a couple years ago about a young woman who goes to Ireland and um, she's experiencing a lot of dashed hopes, and it's just kind of like exploring life as a young woman and what she's supposed to do with her life. And she ends up blessing others and then being blessed herself. And it's just a really clean but fun and just genuine film. It's heartwarming, I would say. And I got introduced to that and seeing her, and I loved her acting. It was very genuine and real and human, and I just felt like, yeah, I can relate to a lot of these things that this movie is talking about. So I am so glad that we got to connect. So Rose, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here, Daniel. Thank you so much.
So, Rose, I want to start out just with the acting because I know, I mean, that is your life now. Did you always want to be an actor, or how did that opportunity open up for you?
So I think I always wanted to be a storyteller, and I knew that. I knew that I wanted to. I didn't know how that was going to manifest itself. I was a huge reader, which I'm sure you can see behind me. I have tons of books behind me. I was a huge reader growing up, and was obsessed with novels and storytelling. And I loved movies. We were a movie going family. We saw movies in the theaters probably at least once a week, maybe if not more, because we loved it so much. We had the whole movie theater pass back when before that was even really a thing. And so I knew that I wanted to be a part of storytelling in some form or fashion, but I didn't think, I grew up in this small town in Tennessee, Middle Tennessee. Grew up on a farm, and I had no concept that film was even a possibility. We were doing, these
Hmm.
little family films, backyard films with my friends, and I would write a script and yell at them if they didn't read their lines right, and I was a tyrant. And I knew that I loved film and I loved being a part of that, but I didn't realize that that was even a possibility. I thought I wanted to be a novelist, and that is something that I'm still pursuing, but I thought I wanted to be an author. And it wasn't until we had a family friend of ours who was in documentaries and had just gotten into feature films and narratives that he reached out, and he needed to use part of our property, or wanted to use part of our property. We have a horse farm, and he wanted to use part of the horse farm as the set for his movie.
Hmm.
And so when that happened, I was probably maybe 13, and or a little bit younger, and I saw for the first time that you actually could make movies in Franklin. This guy was a filmmaker, and he was a local to the town I lived in, and so it felt very tangible and very real and possible all of a sudden. And I thought, I'm absolutely getting into this. And I realized that script writing was a thing, and I decided I was going to be a screenwriter instead of an author. And so I wrote a script. I was very proud of it. I wrote a full feature length script. I don't remember how long it was. It was
Wow.
probably an obscene amount of pages, because I didn't know that there were page counts really, and that you weren't supposed to write a 400-page script. So I wrote a very long script, and I showed it to this producer, and he said, this is okay. It obviously was terrible, but he said, this is okay. What I think you should do is, nobody's going to hire a 13 or 14-year-old screenwriter, but they will hire a 13 or 14-year-old actress, because you need actors of all ages. And so why don't you get into acting and work your way up through the ranks, and eventually, you'll keep working on your craft and being a writer and working on that, and eventually you will get to a point in your career where you are able to start pitching your scripts, and you are able to start saying, hey, will you take a look at my work? And so that's kind of what I did. I got into acting, decided that's how I was going to go about it. Started working my way through the ranks when it came to, you're a extra on this set, and you're a I'm trying to think of what it's called. They're called essays in the UK, but it's like a supporting character and on
Yeah.
another set. And then you work your way to a lead, you work your way up. And so that's kind of that's kind of the route that I took. And along the way, I just realized that I loved acting too. And so now I kind of try to split it 50-50. It did work. I am finally being able to work in the screenwriter's room as well, which is such a blessing. And I'm so grateful for that. But I did find that I loved acting as well. So it was I kind of stumbled into it from that aspect. It was a little bit of a happy accident.
Wow, are you wanting to, do you still want to make your own movie? Like write one?
That's definitely the goal. When I first got into it, my whole idea was that I was going to write the movie, help, I didn't want to direct it, but I wanted to find somebody, I wanted to pick the director, I wanted to executive produce it, I wanted to act in it, I wanted to kind of do everything. And it hasn't totally changed from that. I do understand now that this is not, and that's part of the reason that I love film so much, is because it is not a one man show. You can't wear all of these hats. It does truly take a village, and you absolutely cannot do it without the people that are behind the scenes. You cannot do it without the makeup artists. You cannot do it without the grips and the electrics and the sparks. You can't do it without any of these people
Yeah.
that are all, especially stunts. Oh my gosh, especially if you've got something very stunt heavy. So it does take a village. And so I think now I've realized that I do love working on other people's projects as well so much. I love seeing their visions come together. But yes, that is ultimately the goal, is to be able to write something and be a part of it, maybe act in it. I am entertaining the idea of maybe someday I want to direct, but that is also
Hmm.
such a worthy goal that I think that that's a little ways off. We'll give that some time.
What kind of movie would you like to make?
I think ultimately I like a lot of different films, but I like films that ask questions more
Hmm.
than anything else. And I don't necessarily like giving the audience the answer. I think that that in my opinion, some of my favorite films are films that are left up to interpretation. And there is some really cool reveal that happens in the end that makes you go back and question everything you just saw and say, wait a second, is that real or not? I think one of my favorite examples of that is the Book of Eli. I think that, and
Hmm.
I get in trouble for this all the time for saying that I think the Book of Eli is, with Denzel Washington, is the best Christian movie that's ever been made, and it wasn't a Christian movie, and that's because it they and obviously the color grading not great, but the from a story perspective, how cool is it that you get to have this incredible world where you have tons of world building, you have so much action, you have Denzel Washington, who is the love of my life, out there pulling off an incredible performance, and and yet you get to the end and you have this really cool twist or this really cool reveal, and the whole time you're being told that he is on a mission from God and that God is speaking to him and all these things, and you're thinking you're like, the whole time you're questioning, is he crazy, is he actually hearing from God, or is he like mentally ill and he's hearing things, or is he
Hmm.
making it up? You have all these questions, and in the end you have this reveal that's so cool, and I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but you have this reveal that's so cool that makes you go, whoa, wait a second, and you have to rethink everything, and it doesn't answer the question for you, but it just kind of leaves it open to interpretation and begs you to dig a little deeper. And I think that those are my favorite films. Sometimes those end up in something lighthearted like a rom-com, sometimes those end up in something like a drama. So it
Yeah.
really doesn't it doesn't totally revolve around the genre for me, although I love world building. I love anything fantasy or historical fiction or dystopian, futuristic, anything like that. The opportunity to build a world is so cool. But I love the idea of asking a question and letting the audience answer it. And if they come to a different conclusion than the person next to them, then even better.
I agree. It's hard for me, and I think a lot of, if we're going to talk about Christian film genres, are preachy. I think that's one reason why a lot of them, no offense to anyone listening, of course. I mean, maybe you're going to be offended, but I, I don't, like my favorite movies are not made by Christians, and are not Christian movies, but I find so much more profound life truths that come out of those type of movies than I do in the Christian movies. And it's hard for me that I think Christian movies are getting slightly better in some areas, with some producers and directors, but it is very preachy. And I think when you become preachy, you've lost the art of storytelling because you're not supposed to like preach. It's supposed to be something that people can get on their own. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, and just expounding on that, you mentioned what storytelling is supposed to be. Absolutely. It's not supposed to be preaching to people, but something that I've said before and I think is absolutely true is that one of my biggest issues with a lot of Christian films is that you have made Christ or God the main character of the movie, and you cannot have a main character of the movie that never comes on screen. You just
Mm,
can't. So that's just not how film works. And essentially, God or Jesus is solving all of these problems for the character, whether it's through an emotional change for the character or whether it's a physical change, and they really do get to see some miracle happen in their lives. God is the one pulling these strings, and the character isn't really the one taking action. And so, in order to have just from a storytelling perspective, in order to have a compelling main character, that main character has to be taking definitive and decisive action. You want a character that's
mm,
not laid back and just being dragged through life. But if you have this concept that there is a God and there is, whether it's Christ or God the Father, you want to talk about, you do have this idea that He is kind of orchestrating things and helping you through things and helping you, whether it's, like I said, emotionally or physically, you do have that element. And you can't have a laid back, inactive main character. It just doesn't work. It's not compelling. And so
yeah.
I think that that's one of the biggest problems with Christian film. But I agree that there is also something about being preached to, and like you said, being forced into a conversation. I think that's a problem with a lot of modern films too, is that you know uh people are trying to push an agenda in some films. And so you'll
Yeah.
watch a film and you'll be like, wow, okay, well, they were really trying to send a message there. And
Yeah.
we hate those films. We hate those because it feels like being preached to on both sides of the aisle. Nobody wants to be preached to. So I think that as long as you keep storytelling really genuinely about the story and you build, and maybe there is a message in it, but you let the audience find that message, and you don't shove it down their throats. You don't demand that they pay attention to the thing you wanted them to come pay attention to. There are other areas for you to do that. Podcasts are a great place for you to do that. But in narrative storytelling, I think that the more you can let the audience decide what the moral of the story is, the better.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I was gonna ask, do you have, since you were saying an avid reader, is there a character that you really resonate with that you've read about and you were like, wow, the person who wrote this character is just really, really cool and I really resonate with them?
Yeah, oddly enough, I would say I don't know if you've ever read the book The Cruel Prince, by, oh my
No.
gosh, I'm going to forget her name now that I'm saying it. I probably have it behind me somewhere. Um, I'll remember it here in a minute. But Holly Black. There we go. The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. It's in the fantasy genre, but there's a character named Jude Duarte, and she is, just from her personality and kind of the struggle she goes through and everything, I definitely resonate with her. I was growing up, I was always told that I had a very strong personality. I was told that I had a very masculine personality, which I'm sure is not really coming through right now because I have learned to tone that back a little bit and just be more feminine, embrace my feminine side a little bit more. But I was always told that I had a more masculine side, and I think that's because I approached a lot of problems like men do, rather than if and I say like men do, how do men really, it's everybody's different. So whereas I think most women are very good listeners and they're very empathetic and they want to listen, men are typically more problem solvers and they're like, okay, well, what are we going to do to fix the situation? And so I approached things with that. Okay, well, what are we going to do to fix the situation? I didn't know how to. I was very empathetic, but I didn't know that people wanted to see that, essentially. And
Hmm.
so I think that this very kind of tougher side, this tough love, that feels a little bit more masculine in its energy. And in addition with that, I was very, very ambitious, overly ambitious, and I was incredibly self-conscious, and I didn't feel like I really had, because people critiqued me for my personality, I didn't feel like I had a place really in the world, and I didn't feel,
Hmm.
I felt like I had to earn my place in the world and fight for my place in the world, and nobody was going to give me anything. I really related to this character in The Cruel Prince. I love Holly Black's writing. She's an incredible writer,
Wow.
and I can
I
only,
gotta read this.
yeah, it's really good. I loved it. It's all about ambition and politics and a very and family. Oh my gosh, the family dynamics are so cool, and it's all set in this like fantasy fairy world. I would say that it's the PG, in my opinion, significantly better version of A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I know everybody was raving about. I was not a huge fan, but I think it's the I'm not even gonna say PG. It's the PG-13 version of that. But I love The Cruel Prince, and so I really related to her. That's such an interesting question. I've actually never had anybody. I've had people ask me like, what's my dream character, but I've never had people ask about book characters if I related to anyone. So that's a great question.
Well, and something you said hit me. Why it's interesting you said masculine personality. Why to see when I hear that I think because I know what you're talking about. I have women in my life. Maybe I'm a little more like this too, less feminine. And I want to ask you about this because I think it's really hurtful and destructive. And I've talked to women about this when they're like, I just feel like I'm a very strong personality and it's like make me less a woman somehow. And I don't understand that because you're to be a woman doesn't mean you can't have a strong personality. I think and I think that saddens me. And just in the conversations I've had with people, like they feel like they have to kind of and like like they resonate more with guys and girls are just not very accepting of them and I'm like it's sad because I don't see why you have to be defined by what your personality is like that. And I mean for you saying that you were told over and over you have a masculine personality, I mean was that I mean that must have been hurtful I would think and hard because then you start going well does that mean I'm less of a woman because my personality is stronger?
Absolutely. And I think in addition to that, you know, we have and we talk a lot about uh gender roles and just stereotypes and things like that just in society these days. And while I we don't have to get into that part, I do think that there is an element of that we're kind of coming out of that, like women do have this where women are perceived to the top tier of them are the whole there's this whole social media thing about demure, mindful. That's what people think of when they think of the ideal classy woman. And even though I always aspired to be this like demure classy woman, which I would hope that I am a classy woman at this point, but that was always something I aspired to be. It was very hurtful to realize that if the majority of women, if we're looking at a scatter plot, are within this area, I'm way out here over to the side, and plenty of other women are too. But it was very hurtful because like you said, it does make you feel a little bit less of a woman, and beyond
Yeah.
that, it makes you wonder if are you going to have friends because of this. Yeah, I've had falling outs with friends where truly because of my personality and because they needed someone to sit with them and listen, and I wanted to solve the problem. And we've since reconciled, but I did have I have had friendships that I've lost because seemingly because of my personality. And when you're told growing up that yes, you have this very masculine personality, and you're told even harsher things like nobody's going to like this masculine personality, you should go to therapy to fix this, there is something wrong with this personality, you're not feminine, you're not meant to be this way. It does really
Mm.
mess with you, and you get to a place where you get very paranoid about and I don't know if you've experienced this, but I'm sure plenty of women have, I'm not unique in that you get very paranoid about your behavior, and you start to
Yeah.
wonder. One of my best friends a few years ago said, you can stop apologizing for things. You definitely apologize for too many things, and you say you do something, and then you're immediately like, I'm sorry, did that hurt your feelings, is that okay? And so I think we become very hyper aware and very paranoid that we're going to chase the people in our lives away because we are not stereotypical. And there's no one person to blame for putting that on me, or
Oh
it's not
yeah.
like my parents did a terrible job or anything like that. They did a great job. But I think that you know we have this perception, and we're changing a little bit with that, but we do have this perception that women behave a certain way, and they um guys like girls that smile. We've all heard that stereotype and that joke that you should smile more. And I think I smile plenty, but that you get what I'm saying. It is along those lines, and it's
That's funny because I do not smile enough and I am married, so luckily that is not true for me
yeah.
because I did not smile a lot. I don't. I think I don't know about you, but I think a lot, and so my thinking face looks either dead or mad. But it's not because
Hmm.
I'm either of those things. It's just because I'm thinking. And people
Yeah.
will be like, "You need to smile more. You look so sad." And I'm like, "I'm actually just thinking."
Yeah, it's a little bit of RBF. I think that I have a very reactive face. I should probably go get Botox at some point, I feel like, because I'm gonna have so many wrinkles very soon with the amount of expressions that I make. And so it is kind of hard to be like, "Ooh, let's not make that expression right now." But I think that yeah, smiling is something you're proof right now that you if you didn't smile much and you don't smile much and you've got a husband, then we all knew that that's fine. You don't need to you don't that's not actually true. But yeah, I do think that it's something that I think about anyway. I'm thankfully not as paranoid as I used to be, but it is something that's in the back of your head, like, okay. And you know, I think that because of that, and I don't know about other women, I don't know how you were, if you were, you know, kind of told similar things growing up, but I became a chameleon, and I would try on different, even though it's not my personality at all to be a chameleon. I really don't typically care what people think about me.
Hmm.
But because I was losing friendships, and because what I thought that it was, you know, something that I was doing that was detrimental or whatever it was, and really it just turns out that it was girls being girls and growing up, and you know, you mature and you grow and you know, things happen. But because I so thought it was me, and because you know so many people it becomes such a narrative that something was wrong with my personality. I became such a chameleon, and I started to try on other people's traits, and I would
Hmm.
say, oh, people really like her because because she laughs a lot. Maybe I'll try laughing a lot. Or people really like her because she's trendy and she does all the trendy things, or she speaks a certain way, and so I really like that, and so I would become a chameleon. And that's something that I'm still having to kind of deprogram. And I think that that is currently my least favorite thing about myself, because like I said, growing up, I never cared about what people thought about me. And so I do hate that it has kind of gone there, where I do try on these different traits. But I'm very
Hmm.
grateful to my closest friends who have you know, in the past been like, hey, you don't have to be a chameleon. You know, we like you as you are. You don't need to try on these different traits. And I am very thankful that I have friends that are so kind, and you know, we are able to support each other and call each other out when we see things that they could be doing to either better love themselves or improve themselves. So I wonder if you've had the same experience, or if you were like, nope, didn't care at all what you know what people said about me growing up.
Oh no, I was especially body conscious. I had a lot of
Mm.
friends who were I loved food growing up. And not in a bad way, but I loved eating. And then I started noticing a lot of my teenage friends would like not eat the chips that were brought out with the salsa. And then a lot of friends of mine would not eat the mac and cheese anymore. And like they reached this certain age and they're like, no, I want salad. And I was like, oh. And I started, you know, realizing, oh, is it like bad that I'm, my weight, like my waist is larger than my friends? Like maybe. Like I wasn't overweight, but maybe I should be thinner. And I would look at my friends, and I had one friend in particular who really struggled with her body image growing up. And it was just like, I was like, is something wrong with me because I don't really care about this? Like I want to eat food. I'm hungry. I enjoy it. Grew up in an Italian home. My mom made all this homemade food. I didn't want to just eat the salad. In fact, the salad was the least favorite part of the dinner.
Yeah, I mean, if
But
you grow up in an Italian home and you get homemade pasta, I'm so sorry. Salad is not going to cut it.
but So yes, I do. And I get it. I wanted to ask you, in acting, and we were touching on this before we started, you are surrounded by this all the time. And I mean, you even more so than probably your average person because you are constantly auditioning and doing all these roles. I mean, how do you kind of just take a deep breath and go, well, this is how I am? And obviously, I mean, if there's a certain role where I need to be a particular weight because it's actually contributing to the role, I mean, that's a different story. But just being okay with how you are, I mean, how do you kind of reconcile that?
I think I don't really have a good answer for that right now, because I am still on a journey of finding that good balance. Um, I it absolutely affects me. I think it affects, you know, most people in the industry. If they tell you it doesn't, I would love to know their secret. Please refer them to me. Um, I think that I think that, like you said, there are roles where you do have to change your size a little bit because, like you said, it has it's a defining characteristic of that character.
Yeah.
But I just try to, I think something that I'm kind of learning now, and this is not something, if you'd asked me a year ago about this, I would say, well, I like watching the fitness influencers because they make me, feel they make me want to be better, and they show me that it is possible and all of these things. And even though I still like watching the fitness influencers now, I think that I've gotten to a place where I do realize that everybody is drastically different. I had to lose a bunch of weight for a role, or not a bunch of, I actually had to put on muscle and lose fat, which was very challenging to do in a short amount of time,
Mm.
for a role. And I in order to do that, I was watching all of these fitness influencers and seeing how they did it. And because I was on that journey, it forced me to realize that, these what I eat in a days and stuff like that. That's great. I they're kind of therapeutic for me to watch if I, in the morning or whatever, if I'm putting my makeup on or something like that. But don't read too much into them, because that is so different. Like, how much they're eating is so different from how much I need to eat. And
Right.
it swings both ways. Obviously, sometimes they're eating 2,500 calories a day because they are also doing CrossFit and they are competitive athletes. Okay, well, I'm not a competitive athlete, so I do not need to be eating that much a day. That would probably make me put on weight. But obviously, the other side of it is that, there are people who are more sedentary who are eating significantly less, and I need to be eating more than that because I'm actually working on a farm with horses, and I am burning more calories than I would be if
Yeah.
I were just sitting down all day. So I think that for me, I just have to really take everything with a grain of salt and just not put too much pressure on myself, which is really, really difficult when you have a role coming up and you know that you have to be a certain weight. But whenever I have the benefit of not being on camera for a while, like this year it's been very slow in the industry. And so I was trying to think. I haven't. I've only written this year. This is my first year since I was probably 16 that I haven't actually done any acting. It's all been writing
Mm.
this year.
Okay.
And so this has really been the first year when I've been able to take a step back and say, okay, now that I don't have any roles relying on, you know, me being a certain shape or size or body fat percentage or whatever, I can actually figure out what's sustainable, what works for me, rather than swinging between these fad diets. So I'm still trying to figure that out. I think that everybody is on their own journey, and if you want to post the what I eat in a days, or if you find so much help in the what I eat in a days, that's fantastic. I'm so happy for you. I love watching them too. No judgment here. But I just needed to kind of take everything with a grain of salt because everybody is so different. And I didn't realize how true that was until very recently. I thought I was just doing something wrong, but no, everybody is very different. I need more protein than carbs or fats. I need more fats than I need carbs. So it just depends on you, and I think just trying not to take it too seriously, because I think I can't stress this enough, but your opinion of yourself will so drastically change in a couple of years. I look back at how I looked in, 2020, and I'm like, what was I upset about? I looked fine. And so I think that,
Mm.
just being patient with yourself, that's kind of what helps me, and not putting too much pressure, which, like I said, is really tough. But that's I mean, ask me again in a couple of years when I do actually have this figured out, or maybe ask me again in 20 years when I have this figured out. Right now, I certainly don't.
Do you ever worry? I mean, and obviously this is not right now or whatever, but like I think one thing when I've talked to people, and for me personally, I think a big thing that I worry about is if I ever have children, then the weight changes. And I think people don't, it's, pregnancy is something that people are happy about and excited, and I think you should be, but it changes a woman's body a lot of the times permanently. And so I think
Yeah.
that's one of the things that um I don't know, is kind of scary. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
scary to you, but it's like you're like I won't be able to maybe lose any of that like, special, weight because that's like just gonna stay there. And that's actually something that I think outside of food, that's one thing that I've really now in my life that I'm like that makes me a little nervous.
No, absolutely. I think I love that we're having this very open, honest conversation about that, because that's absolutely a fear of mine as well. And not even just necessarily from the weight gain, but I know that it can also cause, hair loss. There's so many other hormonal things that it can change. I've had friends go through pregnancies. I've had friends who have lost pregnancies,
Mm.
and it, just really wrecks. It can really wreck your body, and some women have no problem with it, and that's fantastic. But a lot of women do really struggle with it. It can really wreck your body, and I so love being able to do the things that I'm able to do. I'm very active. I love working out. I love going on runs. I love working with my horses. I have several horses, and I work with them daily, as much as I can. So it's very important to me to make sure that I am able to maintain that. And I think the good thing from my perspective is that growing up, I always knew I wanted to adopt. Even when I was very young, I would, see families that had adopted kids, and I was like, oh, how cool is that? Your parents like chose you, they picked you out. And my parents are stuck with me, and they just, they had me, and they just had to keep me. But your parents picked you. And I thought that was such an incredible concept growing up. I remember,
Mm.
seeing all of these ads for like, oh, adopt, get into adoption, blah, blah, blah. And that was what I was so called to. I was so called to fostering and adopting and things like that. So that's always really been on my heart. And I remember when I was probably 16 or 17, I was like, if I can't have my own kids, no big deal. I don't really care. Like I don't really want my own kids. I just really want to adopt. And so I don't really feel like I have this pressure on me to actually have my own kids. I think that, if you want to have your own kids, that's absolutely beautiful. And I do, like, there are times where I'm like, oh, but it would be a little me, and like it would be part of me. I think there is obviously moments where my womb is just screaming, but you have to have one that's you. But I 90% of the time, I would be so happy with just adopting. And yes, the idea of your body changing so drastically, and not just your body, but could also be your personality. And I know that so
Yeah.
many women go through depression with during their pregnancies and after their pregnancies, and some people that those those hormones linger, and that's really tough. And I am very blessed to have not struggled with depression. And so I don't really, I'm very scared of changing that. And so like you said, it is a daunting, scary thing. And you said you're married. I take it you don't have kids.
No, not yet. No,
Okay.
I think
But that's
that's,
something you
yeah,
want?
it's a good question, Rose. It's something that I've kind of, I don't know, you were telling me earlier that you came from a Protestant background, as did I. And I kind of always and still have this feeling that you have to have children in order to fulfill your role as a woman. Like you have to make sure you have kids. Um, or somehow you're not fulfilling like the mandate. Like in Genesis where it
Yeah.
talks about like the creation story. And for those listening who are not Christians, in the Bible, in Genesis, Adam and Eve were created by God, and God tells them to be fruitful and multiply. And so after that verse, that's kind of where most believers are like, okay, so now I'm called as a couple if I get married to have children. And I've started meeting couples who actually don't want children. And it's not necessarily, I mean, you can go selfish, what, complicated, however it is, but I wanted to ask you on that. It's like, as someone who grew up in a religious environment and still now is, exploring religion, exploring your faith journey, I mean, how do you think it's a sin or is it wrong if a woman doesn't have a child, but she is married and she could, it's not like there's a health problem, um, but she just doesn't. Like, is there something wrong with that? And to be honest, that's what I've been wrestling with. Is there
Hmm.
something wrong with it if a woman doesn't have a kid, but they are married and could?
Yeah.
So, like, when you're talking about adopting, for instance, as of now, you probably could have a kid, but you don't know. But as of now, you could. But if you chose to just adopt and you didn't have your own children, would that be wrong?
I definitely don't think that it would be wrong, in my opinion. Just on where I am in my faith journey, I completely understand where you're coming from, though, because
Yeah.
it was just unheard of to, if you were, I grew up in the Bible Belt in the South, and it really just is unheard of if you're gonna get married, well, you have kids. That's the next step. And if you can't, it's this devastating thing. Or if you don't, it's this devastating thing. If you see a couple that's been married for a decade and they don't have kids in the Bible, about your first instinct is, oh my gosh, they can't have kids. I'm so sorry. You never think maybe they don't want kids and maybe they're happy not having kids. And so I personally don't. I understand where you're coming from on that. And I understand that pressure. I absolutely grew up with that pressure. And I did until recently feel that, not necessarily that it would be wrong, but like you said, that you're not quite fulfilling the obligation that's been set
Yeah.
before you. And now one of my really good friends said something to me recently that I loved. She is one of the most maternal people I've ever met in my life. She is, so every time she sees a baby, she just reaches for it. She wants that baby so badly.
Yeah.
She's so maternal. She wants kids so badly. And she was, I was talking to her about, what if, just out of curiosity, if she never got married and if she, didn't, wasn't able to have her own kids, would she be happy? And she was like, absolutely. I would just, I think that, I was like, but don't you feel like God's called you to have kids? And she just responded, was like, well, maybe. I think he's called me to be maternal, but I think I can use those maternal instincts in other ways. It doesn't have to be,
That's what
just
I've
with kids.
wondered too. That's
Yeah,
what I've
absolutely.
wondered
So
too.
that's my, I kind of felt that way prior to her saying it, but as soon as she said it, it just solidified everything. And I was like, okay, being maternal doesn't just mean, being a mother to a child that you have had. You can also be maternal to the godchild that your best friend has, and that, you're helping support that mom in her journey. You can be maternal to your parents, honestly, as they are declining in health. You can be maternal to
Mm.
anybody in your life. I think that there's so much beauty in that. Like I said, my friend does not currently have kids. She is the most maternal person I've ever met in my life. And agreed, if she never had kids, I would still say she's the most maternal person I've ever met in my life, and I wouldn't feel bad for her for not having kids. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with it, but I completely understand that feeling of obligation. But I fully encourage you that if you are worried, and I think, obviously I can't speak because I've never had kids, but I think a lot of women would probably say, and people let me know if I'm wrong or right about this, but if you're having questions about, if you're going to be okay with the changes, maybe take your time on that one, because that's my opinion anyway. I am afraid of the physical and mental changes, emotional changes, hormonal changes, things like that.
Yeah.
And so I will. That's not something you want to put on a child. And you never want. You hear these horror stories about, um, moms that never really bounce back, and they kind of secretly, blame their kid for that, for, never got my body back because of you, kind of thing. And or have depression because of you, whatever it is. And I would never want to put that on a child. So I just, it's probably best that I just take my time on that. And thankfully I'm not married. I'm not in a position where I need to be really considering that right now. But like we were talking about, I really feel called to adoption, and I think that that can be just as maternal, as anything else, if not more. Like I said, you're choosing the child, and you get to rehome or give someone a home that might not have a home otherwise.
I don't know if you feel this way, but I I love when I can sit down with someone because I mean, I'm a Christian, and if I sit down with someone who's also a Christian, I ask them a question, whether it be about sex, whether it be about some topic, and they go, "Oh, um, no, I don't want to talk about that," or "Oh, no, uh, and like they don't even can't even use the word. And you're like, but I actually need help. I don't
Yeah,
actually know about this topic. And I really would like to, the other day it's crazy, but even being married, you have questions and you sit down and you're like, hey, I would like some advice on this. And the person, I will ask someone who's not, it's so funny. It's like, it's crazy that so many people who are saved are so uncomfortable talking about life. And you're like, okay, well,
yes.
I don't know how to do this and I need your help.
Mhm.
Or can you be more explicit with me about this? And, why is this a bad topic to talk about? Or why can't I ask this question?
Yeah.
And I think it's sad because, I mean, it's so interesting too, but like, if I'm pulling out scripture, even with doubting Thomas, like, Christ did appear to him, and his disciples did ask him questions, and he did answer their questions. And he didn't say, "Why are you asking questions? Shut up." He never
Yeah.
said that. And everyone was asking him questions all the time. And yeah, anyway, I don't want to make this about me, but I have found that sometimes my best conversations have been with people who do not believe as I do. And they have been very frank about something. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to get at. Thanks for answering that question or being honest with me about it, because there's not anything sinful about asking questions. Um, and we were talking about this earlier, but I was going to ask you because you were sharing with me that, your pursuit of and just kind of exploring faith right now, in part, is because you have a lot of questions and you want them answered, and you're not really finding a space, maybe within the Protestant community at this point, that's giving you that opportunity. Can you tell me, like, what's the first question you asked that didn't get answered? And that for you was kind of like, hmm, but I want this question answered. And that kind of started this journey for you of where do I belong?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. That what was the first question? And honestly, as I'm sitting here right now, I don't even know. I just remember there being so many questions all at once that as soon as I listen a lot to Rabbi David Foreman on he has a Aleph Beta, their online community. I listen to his services and also a lot of his videos. And he has a book, and he's obviously not the person who coined the term. This is a well-known term, but he calls it the lullaby effect. And it is where you hear a story, as you know, I'm sure you've heard of the lullaby effect. You hear a story so many times that it just becomes this lullaby in the background that you don't really even understand what you're reading. And that's how a lot of the stories in the Bible are, for me anyway, is that I read something and I'm like, yep, and then the snake said to Eve this, and then she took the apple, and then they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and that's just what happened. And yeah, then God reached in and took a rib and this, and you're if you actually take a step back and say, wait a second, what did I just read? A snake spoke to Eve? Was that meant to be literal? Was that metaphorical? What was? And as soon as you start, as soon as you realize the lullaby effect and you take a step back and say, whoa, 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 let me actually read this as, and I think film had a lot to do with this, because when as an actor you read a script, and the first time you read a script that you're going to go and do a you're going to go and shoot, you go through and you circle every question that you have. Who is this person? Why is this person doing this? And when you're done with this first read through, you have so many questions, and maybe they've been answered in the end, or maybe they haven't. And that's the beauty of it, is that you get to go then and you get to fill in the blanks, and you get to wonder about why is this the case. And so if you actually go through the Bible from a I guess storytelling perspective, or just an inquisitive investigative perspective, you'll go through and you'll have so many more questions than you were raised to have, in my opinion, or that I was raised to have. And so growing up in a Protestant community, I was raised Baptist, and we weren't given questions. We weren't really told to ask questions. If you ever I thought I was going to hell if I was ever like, is there a God? Like I
Mm.
thought for sure, like if that even crossed my mind, straight to the pit. Yeah, no more second chances for you, sweetie. And now I feel very free to ask those questions. And just briefly going back to what you were saying before about topics being taboo, and certain things that you can't talk about with your friends, I think that that's so heartbreaking to me, because like you said, you really can't have some of these conversations about sex, about your body, about whatever it may be, that's just a little bit more taboo with friends that you share beliefs with, when you can have these conversations. And it's such a shame, because you know obviously the Christian community, there's so many incredible people within, and so many there are so many attributes of the Christian community that are beautiful and so helpful, and I'm so appreciative to have them in my life. That is not one of them. I really wish that we were able to talk about those topics a little bit more. But I think that one of the first questions that I started asking was, why, and this might just be, in my particular church, why were we never reading anything in the Old Testament? If
Mm.
we read anything in the Old Testament, it was kind of painted as, I mean, if you had asked me when I was, young, up until I was probably 14 or 15 years old, I would have said, well, Old Testament is bad, New Testament is good. God of the Old Testament was a meaner, and God of the New Testament was happy and he loved people. And that's the difference.
Oh, wow.
And that was kind of my understanding. Now, I'm not saying that that's, necessarily what the pastor was preaching, but that was the understanding that I got after going to church every Sunday. We were not a, church on Easter and Christmas family. We were at church every Sunday. We were sometimes at church Sunday nights and church on Wednesday nights. And we were immediately in the youth group. We went to the youth camps and stuff like that. And so as I started getting older and I was interested, I'm very fortunate. I was actually homeschooled. And so I very thankful for that. My parents pulled me and let me be in acting, which I really appreciate. And I am so grateful for that education. I went through Liberty University's online academy, loved them. And they gave me a lot of education about other religions as well, which I really appreciated. Despite being a Christian university, they did offer educations in a lot of other religions. And that started making me ask some questions. And I wanted to know, well, why do we believe that this God exists, but why don't we believe that this Hindu God exists? And why do we, whatever it is. And so I started asking these questions, and we weren't allowed to really ask the questions. If you asked the questions, again, you were kind of told, like you said, that it was like they kind of shut down. That's or you got shouted down and you were told, whoa, wait a second. If I ever questioned and said, wait, why do we actually believe in the Trinity? Can somebody explain that to me? Because it's not present at all in the Old Testament. So can someone explain to me why we believe in the Trinity? Can you point out, but why does that mean what we think it means today and stuff like that? If I ever asked that question, it was like, whoa, you're going down a dangerous path, sister. Whereas, I've been listening a lot to Jewish rabbis and learning about, because I do think that there's something so beautiful about that religion. And I'm very curious about Judaism and trying to listen and understand their wisdom as much as I can as a Westerner. But I think that that's one of the things that really attracted me to people like Rabbi David Foreman and some of the other rabbis that I've listened to, is because they encourage those questions. They actually really like the questions. It's funny because I was watching that, whatever that Netflix TV show is, I can't even remember the name of it, that's got the Jewish rabbi and the atheist, I think atheist or agnostic girl, and I was watching that. Was Kristen Bell. I was watching that, and I didn't make it very far, but he the rabbi in it talks about, well, we encourage you to ask questions, and I agree. That's what I found in the minimal Jewish learning that I've done, and listening
Yeah.
to people within that religion explain, a lot of the rabbis on Shabbat and things like that. I I have loved that. That's been such a breath of fresh air to, if I think that if you had gone to a lot of the pastors that I grew up with and said, I don't think that there's, it's not, I don't think, it's that I wonder, is there a God, or is God mean? Or is Jesus really the son of God? Or if you had any of these questions, you probably would have gotten a very frightened look, and you would have had a pastor be like, ooh, we need to, have a sit down conversation. That's a scary thing. But in my experience, and this is probably not true for everyone, but in my experience, when I have asked these questions to people of the Jewish faith, they're very like, yeah, it's a good question. And there's no like pushback on it. It's just like, yeah, you ask that question. That's a good question to have. Why do we think that there's a God? What is there? And they don't, I don't know, there's something about that I really appreciate. And I love asking questions as a storyteller. That's what you do. I mean, obviously you love asking questions too, because that's part of your job, is to dig in and kind of investigate and say, hold on, you said something that I kind of have a question on, and we're going to have to backtrack a little bit. And so I love asking questions, and I love finding out, that and it does feel like an investigation to me, because I think that so easily with the lullaby effect, we get lulled to sleep by some of these stories, when in reality, whether you want to look at the Bible as it is just this incredible story, and maybe it's all metaphor, which I don't believe, but maybe it's all metaphor, it still is incredible. And to be able to dig into that and say, wow, look at these chiasms, look at these, whatever, these patterns that the Bible has. And
Mm.
it's so cool to do. And it is so layered and rich. And that's part of the reason that I like asking these questions. And I don't think we're encouraged to do it in the Protestant church. I don't know what your experience has been with that in particular, with faith. Have you found that, I don't even know what you said you grew up Protestant. So did you did you ever have these like questions about faith, or were you pretty solid in that?
To be honest, I had people who represented God to me and said that this is what God is like, but they were very um mean people.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So for me, it was more like religious trauma, where it was like,
Yeah.
this is God by way of me representing him. So this is what, by extension, this is what God is like. And so I
Ooh,
kind of had to go through, and still am going through this process of God is not this person. I need to read scripture. I need to do my own research who God is, not what this person tells me God is based on their behavior, which I think is one of the most dangerous things. And why a lot of people have left the church, I think in part
absolutely.
is because of that hypocritical, you know, and I think that is such a distasteful thing. Um, you know, I did, you're funny, you're saying backtrack. I did want to say, you, what, is there a question that you still haven't had answered and you really are excited about the day that you will know the answer to it?
Yeah, I love that question because yes, there is something that I'm really exploring, and when I say really exploring, to be completely honest, I haven't had the time to dig into it as much as I've wanted to. So, don't necessarily ask me what my opinion is on it because I don't have one yet. But something that I've kind of been wondering, or I guess a couple of things that I've kind of been wondering about recently is what does the spiritual world look like? Because growing up,
Hmm.
I read Screw Tape Letters, loved it. Huge C.S. Lewis fan. I was in a film where I was forced to read a lot of C.S. Lewis, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I love Lewis, and so Screw Tape Letters was one of those things that I loved growing up. We listened to there was an audiobook, loved that, and so that was and we were always told that there's a demon warring for your soul, there's an angel warring for your soul, blah 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 blah. Well, I've started to find that there are different there are different schools of thought within the religions that I've been kind of studying and looking at, and obviously Catholicism believes very heavily that there is spiritual warfare going on. There really are. You do have a guardian angel. You do there are demons warring for your soul as well, and Satan is a very evil, tangible thing. He does exist. He is in the pit of hell. He is warring for your soul. Whereas Judaism does not see him that way. They do not see this Satan figure that way. And if I'm understanding correctly, and I could be mistaken, so I'll take this with a grain of salt. But if I'm understanding correctly, it's also kind of up for debate whether demons are real or if they are this physical thing or if they interact with the world. And so that's actually a question that I've been asking recently is there's always been this idea of the devil made me do it, and oh well, Satan, don't listen to Satan. And the more I read scripture, the more I'm starting to ask, wait a second, is that actually Satan, or is that just you being, deciding that you were going to be selfish about this? And
Hmm.
I think a good example of that is that there's a lot of times in the Bible where the word hasatan, which is Satan, in Hebrew, and I could be butchering all of this, so again, take it with a grain of salt, but that word is used so many times in the Bible, and it's not always referring to Satan. I believe there's several references where it's just another angel, and they're called a hasatan because it just means the adversary. And so I'm very interested in that. Have we, as our Bibles have been translated so many times, have we mistranslated some of these, moments where it says Satan tells you to do this, but it's really saying the adversary tells you to do this? And then if that's the case, is there, have we misinterpreted? And, are we assuming that the adversary means Satan when in fact the adversary could mean yourself, could mean your own sinful desires, could mean whatever? And so
Hmm.
that's not necessarily to say that I believe that Satan isn't a real being that, did fall from heaven. It's that he wasn't Lucifer and all of these things. But I am asking the question of, do we give him a lot more credit than he deserves? Are
Hmm.
we saying
It's
the
a
devil
good
made me do it
question.
when in fact it really is just you made you do that? And so I think I'm asking that question a lot. That question has really alarmed people that I've been asking because it does sound a lot like me saying is he really evil though? Which I would like to know that too. I would like to know, is this adversary, is he a court appointed, is this a court appointed position that God said, you're going to go play a role for me, go down here? Or is this, really, I guess it all comes back to is there's so many questions. I have so many, if we were to get into theological debate, I'm so interested in, okay, well, if God is omnipotent and omniscient, doesn't that mean that, and if angels have free will or they don't, there's so many questions that I have. And so that particular question of, is is Satan what I've always thought he was? And do demons play a larger role in everyday lives? Is spiritual warfare really a thing? Those are questions I'm really looking forward to having answered. I know that a lot of religions claim to have answers on them, and so I'm just kind of stumbling around in the dark, fumbling and being like, okay, well, what do I think is right? And I haven't really found it yet, but it's so interesting to me. Like I said, I loved C.S. Lewis and Screw Tape Letters, so I am very fascinated with it. I'm looking forward to finding that answer.
Well, it's really good that you, first of all, admit to searching and not knowing, and also just admitting to and having the desire to search. I think sometimes we give up and we just don't know, and it's too hard to put the effort into search, and so we just decide it's best not to know.
I
So,
think, yeah, I absolutely agree. And I also think that it can be scary to search too, because
yeah.
I think that and that's one of the things I had to do when I really started to ask questions, is I had to make sure that it wasn't going to, because my faith is such a big part of who I am. I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to yank the rug out from underneath all my beneath my faith, and the jingle logs were going to fall everywhere. I wanted to make sure that that wasn't going to happen. So I had to really go back down and find the ground level of, what do I believe at my core? And the thing I believe at my core is, there is a God, is a singular God. There is not multiple gods. There is one God, and he did create the world, and he does desire to have a relationship with us, and he is good. And so if I just start from there, then okay, I can disassemble everything else and we can figure it out and put it back together and find the things that I believe are truth, and seek out, I can seek out what I feel is truth, and be looking for that without being afraid that your whole religion is going to fall apart. Because that's something that I was really worried about, is that my whole religion was going to fall apart. And it was also very scary because, like you said, these obligations that we have growing up in the Protestant church, growing up and that's not true for all Protestant churches, of course, but in my particular in my particular circle, it was it was a little scary to question. And I'm sure there are still people who think I'm absolutely crazy that are within my circle, that are like, I she's really gone off the beaten path. But I'm so happy that I've done it now. And it was very scary, and I was very paranoid. But I am very glad that I've done that, because I don't think we serve a God that punishes us for asking these questions. I think that he wants us to. I mean, there are so many scriptures that talk about, like you said, seeking him out, groping for him in the darkness, looking
Yeah,
for that truth. And
very
I don't
true.
think we
Yeah.
can do that unless we have questions. So I think that questions have to be the foundation, the bedrock of our faith. Otherwise, why do we believe what we believe?
Yeah. It's a very good point. It's good. And I want to be respectful of your time. Oh my gosh, I realize how fast time's going, but I wanted to, ask you one more question.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about horses, and I was
Yeah.
thinking you kind of associate horses with like being free, running across or going. What in your personal life, or just Rose herself, like what makes you feel the most free as a person?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if there's one thing. Um I think that I'm going to give you three things, and I'm going to make them very short because I know I'm a talker. Um, but I would say, yeah, horses are a big part of that, because, yeah, you can just let them fly across a field, and there is something so, I think, wonderful about, and people think it's an obligation, but I do think that there is something so freeing about having that animal that relies on you, and that I have to go over and take care of them because you feel needed, I guess. And so there is something that feels freeing about that to me. But I will also say that, writing scripts and writing novels makes me feel very free. I used
Mm,
to I used to have a book blog a very long time ago, and my whole like catchphrase was, reading lets you escape reality, writing lets you create your own. And so anytime I had a bad day or had a bad month or a bad year, I would kind of escape into my writing. And it wasn't
Mm,
a way to, create a new me or anything like that, but it was a way um, to get out those feelings. If I had a bad fight with a friend, it was this really wonderful way to go in and I'm like, okay, well, I'm now going to make a main character that is my friend. And I'm going to go into her perspective and I'm going to go into her thoughts and I'm going to try
yeah.
to figure out like, why did this happen? And, build a character around that. And I think um, that really helped me empathize. And I think it is very freeing. And then my third thing is, this is going to sound very Protestant young girl of me, but I do think my faith is very freeing because at the end of the day, part of my bedrock foundation that I build my faith upon is that there is a plan for everything. Nothing is random. Nothing is without purpose. And so knowing that, I do have full faith and full trust that there is a higher power watching out for me. And if something terrible happens in my life, okay, maybe that's not going to turn into all roses and sunshine down the road, but it might teach me something, and I'm going through it for a reason. And whether I'm going through it so that I can prevent myself from going through it again or prevent someone else from going through it, or even just to tell a funny story someday because it's going to end up on screen, I believe that there's a purpose to it, and that's so
Mm,
freeing. And giving up that illusion of control, because I am a very controlling person, and I'm a storyteller. I want to control things. I want to construct the whole narrative. But
yeah.
there is something so freeing about knowing that you don't have control and being okay with that and knowing that there's someone else watching out for you.
Hmm. Well, Rose, I've got to say, this has been so fun. I've almost forgotten we're recording and like it feels like we just met at a coffee shop or something and we're just talking, but um yeah, I thank you so much for sharing and getting to know you better. And honestly, I'm excited to see what other movies you do, and I do hope that you get to make a movie. That would be really cool to see what kind of movie you would come up with.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've had so much fun doing this. I agree. It does feel like we've just been having conversation over coffee. We should definitely do this again sometime. I don't know where in the country you are, but we should definitely connect sometime and we can actually have this conversation over coffee and decide later if we want to record it.
Yeah. That's true. And that's a very feminine thing of you to say.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate that. I'm gonna manifest that. I've tried very hard to be feminine. I wear my dresses, I put my hair down, I wear my necklaces, put on my perfume. I'm very feminine. But yeah, no, I've absolutely loved having this conversation with you. And I hope, if we're able to talk again at some point, I get to hear more about your story as well. I'm sure, yeah, as an interviewer, you probably ask um hundreds of questions a day, but I've loved getting to hear glimpses into your life as well. And I think you're a fabulous interviewer because you have the perfect blend of asking questions and also infusing your own life into things and relating, and you're not just here to ask questions, and I love that. And so thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you, Rose. Well, you have a good night.
Thank you so much. You too.